thank you to everybody who's joined tonight. I was silently sitting in the background covertly. That is my last name, Covert, as you guys were chatting with one another. And you're a lovely group. I could just tell beautiful smiling faces and some nice camaraderie. And I just always appreciate that. And I also always appreciate when a pastor reaches out and asks for me to talk about resilience, self-care, mental health, because I think that's a really important part of who we are, that we take care of ourselves emotionally, mentally, as well as physically, spiritually, in all areas of our life. So thank you for coming. Thank you for setting aside time on a Tuesday evening. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about what I call real resilience. It's not just, bubble bath and things like that. Like there's a way that we can actually do proper self-care. So hopefully some things I share tonight are helpful. Some of you might also be your own experts in mental wellness. And so I just invite you to listen with an open mind. Maybe you'll glean something new. Maybe I'll learn from you with some of the questions at the end. But I do hope and pray this is helpful information. So I'm going to try sharing my screen. And hopefully it goes off without a hitch. And I'm going to go back and forth because I like to try and keep things a little dynamic because Zoom, we can get zoomed out. So can everybody see my PowerPoint? Yeah, okay. So there I am again. We've already done the intro. So I wanted to start by talking about mental health. I think it's important, if we're going to talk about resilience, we have to talk about mental health. And people always say to me, they ask me questions about different diagnoses and what makes people at risk for mental illness and mental health conditions. It's actually pretty straightforward. We all exist on a mental health spectrum somewhere. And I like to look at it as a spectrum because I actually think that reduces a lot of stigma, a lot of judgment, because at any point in our life, based on things we go through, based on experiences we have, how we're doing physically, how we're doing spiritually, emotionally, we can move on that spectrum. We can go from one side to the other. Maybe one day I feel like I've got optimal mental health and everything's great. And maybe another day I'm really struggling. Maybe I've been struggling for months on end, and maybe I'm borderline depression. I'm experiencing some borderline depression symptoms. And so I might shift on that spectrum. And I share that to sort of normalize even this season we've been through. I don't have to, it's not going to be rocket science information here when I say that we've been going through a global pandemic and everybody's been struggling. But I like to take a moment when I talk to just normalize that for a moment, because even if we cope well, even if you're very positive, very optimistic, and you always, look for meaning in trials and tribulations, this has been a very difficult season for all of us. Change takes a toll on our brain, even if it's positive change. Someone getting married, having a baby, going to school, getting a new job, even that level of change can actually fatigue our brains because it's new information. It's not muscle memory. We have to use extra energy to learn and adapt and cope with all this new information. And with COVID, for over the last year, it's been constant new information, new lockdown, new protocols, vaccine information. Who do you believe? What's the media saying now? What's Ford saying now? And all of that, even if it was positive, would be exhausting. And we know that it hasn't all been positive. There's been a lot of difficulties. We've known people that have gotten sick. We've been afraid of getting sick, childcare issues, you name it. There's been so many, not being able to have the freedom to go and do our normal life. And it's affected us. And so I want to start by normalizing that, because all of us in some way, I believe, are experiencing what I call COVID burnout. And it's just a reality that maybe some of us are a little more tired than normal. Maybe we're a little bit edgier than normal. Maybe our stress threshold is a little more compromised. And so the timeliness of a presentation like this, I really hope it's helpful. But again, to normalize that we're all in this together. I really try to focus on anti-stigma, because sometimes we can self-stigmatize. And the word stigma basically means tattoo. Like the word comes from when they would, in ancient Greece, they would tattoo a criminal to say this person has done something bad. So we're going to put a tattoo on them so we can ostracize them from society. So when we stigmatize each other or ourselves, we kind of tattoo ourselves and say something's wrong with me or I'm different. And in reality, all of us are on that mental health spectrum. There is no line that divides one person from the other. If we don't experience a mental health issue, someone we know and love will. So it's important that we have that self-acceptance and that understanding. So going back to my presentation here, and in that same vein of thinking, I hope you can see this. You might, like me, have to move the little box of people that's at the side, but this is a diagram that basically describes risk for mental health issues. And this is why resilience and self-care is so important. So basically, this diagram says that even if you're just a little bit vulnerable genetically, if you have high enough stress, you could develop a mental health issue. So whether you're super vulnerable to mental illness naturally, genetically, based on circumstances, based on trauma, or whether you're very slightly vulnerable, if you have enough stress, any of us could develop a mental health issue of some kind. And so resilience is like a safeguard. It's like a protective bubble wrap. It's a way that we can actually reduce our vulnerability, reduce the risk that we might develop a mental health issue. And what is resilience? This word I've already been throwing around a whole bunch of times. It's basically the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, to rebound after a trial. If we were an elastic band, it would be the ability of that elastic band to bounce back into shape after it's been stretched. And a lot of theory behind resilience is that if you can balance out negative experiences with positive supports, people are resilient. And this theory would say that if you've had a lot of negative experiences, you just need a lot of positive supports to balance it out. Or if you have lots of positive supports, you can handle higher levels of negativity because, again, the scale won't tip. And that is true. There's a lot of truth to that. If we take good care of ourselves, if we're positive, if we have people that care about us, we can cope with a lot of difficulty. But is it fully accurate? You know, we look at this year we've had. What if I've been optimistic? What if I've been positive? What if I have a family who loves me and I have a job and I'm financially okay and all of these different things? Have I been resilient? Am I actually okay? There's actually more to it than this. And it's what I call the resilience paradox. And so resilience is that elastic band. It's snapping back into shape. It's bouncing back after trial. And a lot of times we see it as, let's just be positive. Let's just think better. Let's just have good coping skills and surround ourselves with healthy people. And that's good and true. But the paradox, the challenge we have is sometimes the more positive you are, the actually more vulnerable you can become if being positive means you don't get to experience negative emotions. So I don't know if any of you identify with this. A lot of people in my field, in the mental health field, walk through this journey. A lot of people in my church, and I know believers all around the world, walk through this journey. And a lot of my friends and families also struggle with this. If you are a naturally optimistic, hopeful person, you are at risk for high levels of stress because you might deny your emotions when you're struggling and suppress them. So for example, if I'm feeling anxious, well, that's not good. I need to reframe that. I need to think more positive. If I feel sad, I just need to take care of myself and just get over it. I'll be fine. I don't know, there might be different generations on this call, but some of us were taught to, pull up your bootstraps or put on a stiff upper lip or, boys don't cry, whatever it is that you might have heard growing up, to toughen up, to be strong. There's a silver lining. There's always good comes from the bad. If you're a Christian, you might hear the verse, God works all things together for good for those who love him and are called according to his purpose. And that's true. I believe that's true. But that doesn't mean we're not meant to experience negative, difficult emotions like sadness, like anxiety, like fear, discouragement, hopelessness. In fact, we need to experience these things. I believe emotions are a gift. We are wired to experience them, and in experience them and processing them, we can actually be more resilient. Forgive me as I go back to my screen. So sometimes when we don't do what I've just said about taking that time to identify how we're feeling and to walk through those negative emotions, sometimes what we see are what I've got on the screen right now. These are flags to look for that maybe you're struggling, maybe you're burnt out. And I specifically call them flags and not flaws for a reason, because when I do counseling with people, a lot of times people will say, Amory, I just feel like I'm being such a bad person lately. I feel so apathetic, or I feel so easily upset, or I'm angrier than I used to be. And that's always a flag to me that somebody is burnt out, or that they're discouraged, or they're emotionally overwhelmed with feelings that they have suppressed for a really long time. Tears we don't cry outwardly, we're going to cry inwardly. Whenever I work with somebody who has anger management difficulties, I know that below that is either unresolved grief, unresolved depression, or unresolved anxiety. So these are flags that you might be struggling, or someone you love. Now, I don't want anyone to self-diagnose. This is for awareness purposes so that we can get better and we can be resilient in a way that's meaningful. So things like insomnia, or having nightmares, being lethargic and exhausted, muscle fatigue. When we hold on to emotions in our bodies, we actually feel it physically. So if we don't process things emotionally, we can process them physically. And that can show up as literally just feeling achy all over our body, being weak, having heart palpitations, digestive issues, very common when people are struggling emotionally. In fact, a lot of people with IBS actually have anxiety, and it's a misdiagnosis. So I just plant that seed out there, just the mind-body connection. Cynicism, feeling callous, just having a bit more of an edge on how you see the world, having lower empathy than you normally do, feeling a sense of dread and worry that maybe you normally didn't, feeling useless. I've worked with a lot of people in helping professions that in this season feel useless because they can't change things. They can't make COVID go away, and they feel helpless. They help people during the day, and at night they also have to deal with the world we live in right now, and they can't switch it off like they used to. People are easily irritated. They're feeling unmotivated. It's just harder to do the same things we used to do. We're seeing a lot more sick days. Presenteeism, that's when people go to work or show up in life, but they're not really there. They're there, but not really there. And then there's absenteeism, which is just when you're absent. There's avoidance, discouragement, loss of interest in things you once enjoyed, and anxiety and depression. Now, this sounds like a disheartening list. It sounds sad, but it is a result of when we don't take care of ourselves. And from well-meaning, it's not that we're purposely trying to ignore ourselves. Just sometimes we haven't been taught. We haven't been taught that it's okay to be anxious, that anxiety is telling us something. It's telling us we have an unmet need somewhere and we need to meet that need. Or depression, it's telling us something. It's telling us that I have a sadness and a hopelessness that I need support. Maybe it's a history of trauma. Maybe I've had incredible loss. There's something there. There's an unmet need to address. So the way that we can start to create change, I want to move towards hope now, acknowledging that maybe some of us have been struggling, acknowledging that maybe we have been doing some self-care, maybe bubble baths and reading good books and being positive, but that there's some underlying things we need to process. I want to share with you what I believe are 5 paths to healthy resilience, balanced resilience, and true self-care. And these are things that I would share with helping professionals. I would share with people who are caregivers, and just for anybody who wants to take better care of themselves or support someone else who might be struggling. The first one is to build a foundation of wellness. And the reason why I share this is because we are a lot more than a brain. We are complex people. We have different domains of our life that all need attention when it comes to our mental health. We have the physical parts of ourselves: social, emotional, spiritual, and psychological. Now, I'll give you an example. Once I worked with someone who came to me with blackout anxiety and anger. And I could have done counseling with that person. I could have done cognitive behavioral therapy, and I could have talked to them about their history of trauma and provided emotional support. And all of that would have been lovely, but it wouldn't have solved the issue. Because for that person, I asked them, I said, tell me about your diet. What is your diet like? And this person shared with me that they drank about 6 energy drinks a day, and they lived off of fast food. And I don't know if you know about caffeine and what it does to our body and our brain, but any human being having 6 energy drinks a day is going to have an anxiety disorder. They just are, because our heart will beat too fast. It'll trigger our sympathetic nervous system and put us in a constant state of stress, the fight or flight response. And just from caffeine, just from eating poorly and having too much caffeine in their body. And so we have to look at each area of our life so that we can take proper care of our well-being. And it's interesting. So I'm a Christian. Some of you on this call are also Christians. Even the world outside of Christianity, even the world outside of faith, psychology, the field of psychology now recognizes that we are spiritual beings and that that is a part of our mental wellness. You know, I worked at a secular agency for 15 years. And as I was leaving, they were working on spiritual principles to mental health because they recognize if we neglect that part of ourselves, we can struggle. So one of the paths of resilience is focusing on each domain and looking for where there might be gaps. You know, physically, am I getting sleep? Am I eating well? Am I depriving myself of nutrients? Am I drinking enough water? Am I exercising? You know, a pond that doesn't move is going to get murky and muddy, and our bodies are 65% water, give or take. And if we don't move, we get murky, we get muddy, and we feel that way. Exercise is a natural antidepressant and a natural anti-anxiety. We absolutely need to take care of our physical selves. And if we're going through an illness, that's going to affect probably our emotional well-being. And sometimes people have mental health issues that are actually physical health issues, like hyperthyroidism can look like depression. And as I said earlier, you know, IBS can actually be anxiety. And so it's important to get checkups with our doctor and take good care of our physical health. You know, socially, we have to take care of our social domain of our life. Do we have meaningful connections with other people? Are we isolating? Is that affecting ourselves and our resilience and our self-care? Emotionally, I've talked about experiencing emotions, and I'm going to get more into that shortly. Our spiritual side of ourselves. Are we abiding? Are we seeking a higher power, higher than ourselves? For those who might not know God personally on this call, are you open to the spiritual side of yourself? Are you open to exploring spiritual things? And psychologically, how am I thinking? What are my thinking patterns? Am I learning new things? Am I being challenged in a healthy way, but also giving myself brain breaks once in a while, especially during COVID? We all need brain breaks after all the change we've had. So one path to healthy resilience is taking care of these different domains and building a foundation for wellness, because all the other stuff is going to fall flat if we don't have the foundation of the house built. And this is our foundation, taking care of each area. The next path is to check in with yourself. Now, it might sound simple, but from experience, a little disclosure here, I have burnt out 3 times. Working in mental health for 15 years, being a personal caregiver to someone with a very serious mental health issue, struggling with my own mental health from time to time. Again, we all live on that spectrum. Helping people, life can be a lot sometimes. And I've burned out 3 times. And I have learned from experience that we need to check in with ourselves because life is fast, life is busy. And if we don't take that time to do a self-check-in, we might miss some of those flags I was talking about. So for me personally, maybe a flag is, oh, I kind of notice I'm feeling tense in my neck and my shoulders lately. That is me recording stress in my body. That is where I carry it. And so if I notice that I'm feeling tense there, I notice I might have some unprocessed emotions. I might not be doing enough self-care. Or if I notice that maybe I'm just kind of going really fast and I'm not really eating right and I'm really needing that coffee to start my day and I'm kind of feeling achy in the morning when I wake up, those are some flags. Those are some cues. So for a self-check-in, there's 3 questions you can ask yourself. And this is how we do it. So what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And that can be emotionally or physically. And what do I need? So what am I thinking? What am I feeling? And what do I need? And again, so simple, but it can be profound. You know, we could have a day where we just feel edgy. And if we take that moment, what am I thinking right now? Well, I'm thinking this. And how am I feeling? Well, I'm feeling this. What do I need? I need a hug, or I need 5 minutes to unwind, or I need to get a babysitter for tomorrow night, whatever it might be. Taking that time, I need to eat. You know, sometimes it can be, you know, those Snickers commercials, you're not yourself when you're hungry. That's a thing. We call that HALT. You know, am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? That's another self check-in. But the basic one, if we can remember to just ask ourselves, what am I thinking? What am I feeling? What do I need? That can be a self-care moment in our day where we can shift our entire day by taking that moment to acknowledge our needs and then do what we can to meet them. A lot of counseling is that. It's teaching people how to do those self check-ins, how to be aware of what they're thinking and what they're feeling. Going back to my screen. And the next one is processing emotions. So I've been talking about that through this whole presentation, and this is so key to resilience and true self-care. And there's some skills that I want to share with you. And please don't panic. You will get a copy of this PowerPoint, and this is also being recorded. So I know some of you are taking copious notes, and I talk fast sometimes when I've got a lot to cover, but all of this you'll be able to go back to, as well as some of them are handouts. So some ways that we process emotions are, the first one is we can embrace emotions like a wave. Now, if I put you up against a polygraph machine, and if I hooked you up and I told you, no matter what, try not to feel anxious, even though if you feel anxious, this machine is going to kill you. So don't feel anxious, because if you do, this machine will kill you. So if you knew your life depended on not being anxious because the machine would kill you, would you be able to stop being anxious? Probably not. You probably wouldn't. It probably would make you more anxious, because we can get anxious about anxiety. When we try to fight emotions, it can actually make us more anxious. And so it's actually better to experience emotions like a wave. So if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling sad, whatever it is that's trying to come upon you, it's actually more efficient and more helpful to let it come over you like a wave and then pass over you. Because then we're not going to add fuel to the fire. We're not going to make it worse. We're just going to experience it like a wave. And that is actually a really common anxiety coping strategy. It works for other emotions as well. We all get overwhelmed sometimes. So just let it come at you like a wave and then pass over you. Another way that we can process emotions is actually just to acknowledge our emotions. And one that I like to call it is name it to tame it. I've heard that said a few places, and it's one that I've kept. So when we name an emotion, we tame an emotion. If I'm feeling frustrated and I just say, oh, I'm feeling frustrated right now. Again, simple, but profound. In that moment, I'm validating myself. I'm acknowledging how I feel, and it starts to dissipate the emotion. That emotion starts to lose some level of power over me. So simple things like naming an emotion to tame an emotion can alleviate stress. Instead of just trying to suppress it, sweep it under the rug, just acknowledge it. Journaling, a lot of you are taking notes. That's a great skill. Journaling is a very powerful way to write out what we're thinking and to process our thoughts. And there's been a lot of research in this area. Again, if you think it's simple, there's so much research in this area where people who journal tend to have higher quality of life, higher life satisfaction. They learn more about themselves, they have self-reflection, but it's also this ability to take what's in my head and my heart and put it on paper so I'm processing it. So if you need an excuse to go to Chapters when the lockdown ends, now you have one. Go and buy a journal. I love a new journal. And another way to process emotions is to look for meaning. I said a scripture earlier, that God works all things together for good. I believe that with my whole heart. That's proven true in my life time and time again. That doesn't mean I neglect my emotions that I'm experiencing in the journey. A third of the Psalms in the Bible are lamenting Psalms. It's David pouring out his heart toward God. And at the end, he says, yes, Lord, I have hope in you. But he gets there after he looked for meaning and he processed his emotions. And so to look for meaning for us might be just thinking, like, what might the purpose in this be? What can I learn from this? How can I use this to help someone else? When we get really good at processing emotions, that's actually a gift we can now give to other people. Because I can tell you from experience, most people don't know how to do this. We've not been taught it in society. It's a skill we've lost over time. We've stopped normalizing grief and pain and anxiety and depression. And so if we can learn, even from our own stories and our own struggles, how to get through it ourselves, how to take care of our well-being and be resilient, that's now a gift that I can give someone else. And that in and of itself is meaning making. That's making meaning, and it's processing emotions. Some grounding techniques are also some ways that we can process our emotions, especially when the emotions are too big. Sometimes we're just so stressed. It's too much to think about journaling in that moment. It's too much to think about something that's too cognitive in that moment. And so some of the grounding techniques that are simple are deep breathing. So when we're stressed, our fight or flight response has kicked into gear. We are in a stressed state in our sympathetic nervous system. Deep breathing is the quickest way to enter our rest and recovery nervous system. It's called the parasympathetic nervous system. It's like a parachute. It slows us down. It calms us down. And breathing deeply, if you even were to breathe deeply and practice and put your finger on your pulse, you'll notice that your pulse starts to slow down when you deep breathe, even just a little bit. And the more you practice, the more you'll notice your pulse going down. People who practice this exercise their nervous system. It's like building a muscle, and they teach it to go into rest and recovery quicker. So deep breathing, not just when you're stressed, is a good strategy. Deep breathing regularly, breathing from your belly like a baby does. Do you ever see a baby lying down, their bellies go up and down when they breathe? We've lost that when we grow up. We lose it. We breathe from our chest, which is very shallow breathing. So breathe from your belly, breathe in for 7 seconds, breathe out for 8. Or you can do 4-4-4. Breathe in for 4, hold for 4, out for 4. The one I like best personally is to breathe in for 7, breathe out for 8 counts. But as long as you slow your breathing down, you're entering into your parasympathetic nervous system. So if you forget 7 and 8, that's okay. The next one is 3-3-3. I know these are lots of tools, but I like to give lots of tools because people always want tools. So 3-3-3, it's a grounding technique where all you do is say 3 things you see. So I might say that I see the white walls in front of me, I see the computer screen in front of me, and I see the window outside. I can see outside my window. And then 3 things you can touch. I can feel the desk in front of me is smooth and cold. I can feel my wrists are soft and warm. And I can feel my cup of juice is also kind of cold and a little wet because of the condensation, because it's very hot outside. And then move 3 parts of your body. So maybe I'll move my wrists, I'll move my neck, and maybe I'll wiggle my toes. So just saying 3 things that you see, touching 3 things that are close to you, and moving 3 parts of your body. 3-3-3. It's a grounding technique when you're feeling a lot of emotion. The 5-finger method is another skill. I probably won't go all the way through it. It's similar to 3-3-3, but I have a handout that will be shared with you after. It looks like this. So it's a 5-finger method, and I don't know what happened there. I lost my my handout. I lost my handout, but you will get it. And it just says it's like 5 things again that you can see, 4 things that you can hear. I think it's 3 things you can touch. It kind of works down to smell and taste. I think the last one is taste. And again, another good grounding technique that you can use. Another way to process emotions and just to take good self-care of ourselves is finding anchors. So anchors are things in our life that are safe, reliable, and familiar. So with COVID, all the change we've been experiencing, I went through a work integration a number of years ago where it was chaotic change for 3 years. Maybe you're going through a lot of personal change in your life. Maybe you have a child getting married. Maybe you're about to have a baby. Maybe you've relocated. Whenever we have a lot of things happening that are creating change, creating crisis, it's helpful to have anchors, things that we can rely on that are consistent, they're safe, and they're familiar, because familiar is often safe. It's reassuring for our brain and our heart because we've been there, we can rely on it. That might be things like walking your dog every day at 8 a.m. That's an anchor. It might be calling a friend every Friday for a coffee and chat phone call. That's an anchor. It might be your devotional time every morning or every evening. That's an anchor. So find some anchors in your life. If you're feeling particularly swirled around by COVID and everything that's been going on, I really encourage you to maybe amp up the number of anchors that you have. If you work during the day, maybe your anchor is that you take your lunch. So many people don't take their lunch. Take your lunch, go for a walk, do what you can do, but find anchors in your life. And then another one is healthy distraction. So I want to be careful with this one because sometimes people will distract themselves so much from difficult emotions, difficulties in life, that it becomes what we call a maladaptive coping strategy. So it actually can become an unhealthy thing when we never face our emotions and we always avoid things that are difficult because they're uncomfortable. That is unhealthy distraction. You know, people might turn to alcohol, they might turn to different things. Healthy distraction is when, in little bits, when we just need to switch gears, we distract ourselves so that we can feel better. So that might be, you know, sometimes walking away from a conversation that is too difficult in that moment so you can have some space. It might mean instead of thinking about the thing that you've been processing all day and you just don't have a solution yet, it might mean putting on a nostalgic movie like The Little Mermaid or something else that just feels comfortable and familiar. That can be a distraction. It might mean picking up a book and reading it, going for a walk. Healthy distraction can be very good for our resilience. If you notice you're doing too much distraction, then it might be a discussion with yourself or with a counselor or another support person about how you can address some of the difficulties in your life in a way that's tolerable. It's a balance, right? Resilience is a lot about balance in our life. Now I'm going to try and share my screen again, but I might have lost my PowerPoint. So I'm going to, no, I didn't. I think it's still there. I'm just not on the right slide. So I'm going to find my slide. Gotta love technology. And okay. Home run, guys. I know this is a bit, I've been told before, I'm a bit like drinking from a fire hose. So practice self-acceptance. This one is so, I know I say each one is important, but really, guys, this one is so important. So cognitive behavioral therapy is the most researched therapy for emotional wellness. And it's had 3 waves over the decades that it's existed. And the most recent wave is compassion-focused CBT. So they're saying use this skill set to help people, but do it from a lens of compassion. And we're like, well, that's, you know, not rocket science, but it is kind of rocket science. We actually heal in a lens of compassion. You know, compassion itself is healing. You know, again, as a Christian, Jesus was moved with compassion and healed the sick. But as a counselor, I know that if I don't have compassion for the person sitting right in front of me, I'm not going to see them get better. That compassion is like a conduit for people to get better. Brene Brown is a social worker who's done a lot of research in the area of shame. And shame, I believe, is the root of most mental health issues. Not all of them, but most of them. Sometimes biologically that can cause mental health issues, but shame truly is the root of most. And the remedy for shame, the antidote for shame, is compassion. And one of the best ways we can experience compassion is actually having self-compassion. You know, if I think I'm worthless, if I think I'm no good, I'm going to feel worthless. I'm going to feel guilty. I'm going to feel shameful. And that's going to affect my life because what I think becomes what I feel, becomes what I do. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. What we think and what we feel becomes what we do. If I think I'm worthless, I'm going to feel worthless and unworthy of love. And so I'm not going to reach out to people to be my friend. I'm not going to apply to that job because I'm not good enough. I'm not going to go to God in prayer because I don't think he's happy with me. I think he's angry. It really affects our life. And we can start to shift that and rewire our heart and brain with self-compassion. And that can be very foreign for some people, but it's a skill that can be learned. Things like affirmations. I'm just going to go back to my PowerPoint. Affirmations and what we say over ourselves can be so powerful. So I'll go quickly through this, but some skills in this area are things like building a sense of mastery. And what does that mean? It means I've mastered something. Making my bed in the morning gives me a sense of mastery. I start my day off on the right foot because I did something. I accomplished something. I made my bed. And so finding other areas in our life where we can feel like I've accomplished something. Remember I said with COVID, a lot of people feel useless. That leads to burnout. So I need to feel useful and have self-compassion and find things that I'm good at and then acknowledge that I'm good at that. Maybe I'm really good at crocheting. Maybe I'm really good at social media. Maybe I'm really good at loving people and being empathetic. Find things you're good at and invest yourself in them. Have some mindful recharges. I've coined this. I like to call it mindful recharges. Another way to call it is a brain break. Another way to call it is just a mindful moment. But 5 minutes in a day, when you do a little mini self-care and you allow your brain and your heart to rest and you do something just for you, that's self-compassion. I remember one of the times I burned out, I sat at my table and I had a cup of tea and a cookie. And that sounds silly, but that was such a pivotal moment in my recovery, just to take 5 minutes to have this mindful moment, recharge, kind of reflect, and just enjoy my tea and my cookie. That's being mindful, like not thinking about everything else, but just the tea and the cookie. And it was like a jolt that put me on the right direction to get better. So never underestimate the power of a 5-minute vacation or a 5-minute mindful recharge. In fact, if you were to even just imagine going somewhere safe and beautiful, like, I don't know, a beach in the Caribbean, if we were to take a scan of your brain, it's actually going to light up different areas than what it would if you were thinking about, work or just everyday things. So it is self-care for our heart and mind when we do a mindful recharge. Boundaries. I won't say a lot here, but a lot of people are not very good at saying no. And part of self-care, part of self-compassion with self-care is saying no, not saying yes to everything. Sometimes it means even saying no to good things just because you have too much on your plate, and that's okay. And if you really struggle with that, that's something you could talk to a support person about. You could talk to maybe your pastor about, or another support person, a counselor, because boundaries can be a big area where people don't take care of themselves because they don't think they have the right to have boundaries. Catch it, check it, change it is cognitive behavioral therapy. And it's also in the Bible, for those of you who read the Bible under Christians. It's when we have a negative thought about ourselves, because this is about self-compassion here, we can catch it, we can stop it where it is and just catch it, check it. Is this thought true? Is it good? Is it helpful? Is there another way to look at this thought? Is there evidence that this thought is even remotely true or relevant to my life? And then we change it. So if I have the thought, no one likes me, okay, I'm going to catch it right there because I know that's not a healthy thought, even though I think it all the time. And I'm going to check it. Okay, no one loves me. No one likes me. Well, I do have this friend, and, I haven't really been reaching out to people. So maybe it's not that they don't like me. Maybe I've just gone quiet and they stopped reaching out because I went quiet. So we're checking it and we're going to change it. No, it's not true. People love me and I'm worthy of love. That's cognitive behavioral therapy. Any counselor will probably walk you through that, but if you can learn that on your own, you're going to be resilient. You're going to do good self-care. Affirmations. I have a handout for you on this. Our mind listens to what our mouth has to say. Our words are very powerful. And so if we're speaking horrible things over ourselves, that is going to teach our heart and mind horrible things. But if we speak beauty over ourselves, we speak affirmations, we speak truth, things like, I have value, there's a purpose for my life, I have a unique calling that only I can fulfill, I am worthy of love, I have permission to have boundaries. All of these things can become affirmations, and the handout will walk you through that. And then self-care, soul care. This whole presentation is self-care. I like to call it soul care personally, because I think it's about taking care of our soul. Our soul is a gift. And it's on here as a skill because we can be very intentional about self-care. Are we doing things that we enjoy? Do we have a hobby? Do we find enough rest in our life? Are we taking care of our souls? So if you walk away with nothing else from today, I encourage you even just to focus on increasing your self-care. We need a lot of it right now. We need to do a lot of it. Even with me, I work from home right now. And one of my self-cares is every day before lunch, I go for a walk with my husband and my son around our neighborhood. Just a 20-minute walk. For me, that is self-care, that is soul care, and it makes a big difference. And then the last piece of healthy resilience is practicing connection. The American Psychological Association, and they have pointed out that meaningful connections is the #1 factor in our resilience. We are created for community. We need each other. And with COVID, we've been isolated. That's the exact thing we've not had connection. And so the way that we can take care of ourselves, and have this path to healthy resilience is to find creative ways to connect with people, whether that's through Zoom, things like this, being part of a small group, connecting with an online community, walking around your neighborhood and saying hi to neighbors on their lawn. Find ways to be connected with people. And connection is more than just, FaceTiming someone or calling them on the phone. Connection is having people in your life that you can be vulnerable with and you can be authentic with. If you don't have relationships that allow you to have those two things, vulnerability and authenticity, you might find that you burn out in life, because we all need that. We all need someone, at least one person, who we can share our sorrows with, we can share our brokenness with, and we can be totally authentic. Don't have to put on a filter. We always filter in life a little bit here and there, but we need at least one person, even maybe a community if possible, where we can be ourselves. I like to call that a tribe. Sometimes church families offer that, which is beautiful. But one person, try and find someone you can connect with. And we're almost there. Sometimes connection also means connecting to resources, which is how we're going to end my presentation today. So I wanted to equip you guys with lots of resources that are all free of charge, because I know everybody comes from different situations. And with COVID, again, finances can be difficult for a lot of people. And so there are a lot of different options now in our virtual environment. I've got some apps on here. Don't feel like, again, you need to write them all down. You're going to get copies of this PowerPoint. But those are some apps that you can download on your phone or tablet that are good for self-care, resilience, mental wellness. Then there's some online programs which are really fabulous. And in fact, one of them, Mind Beacon, is free right now for anybody who lives in Ontario. That normally costs, I think, $100 a session or something. Like it's therapy. It's online therapy, and it's free for residents of Ontario during COVID. I don't know how long that's going to last, so it might be something to take advantage of now. Bounce Back Ontario is it's a CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy coaching program. It's a self-help program. They give you worksheets and videos, but you can also talk to a coach, which is similar to a counselor, and they can guide you through the self-help that you're doing. Then Wellness Together Canada, I don't know as much about, but I've heard good things. There are some phone lines that can be helpful. There's a suicide prevention hotline. Connex Ontario is actually a government site that you can call, but you can call them and say, I live in Waterloo, or I live in Kawartha Lakes. Wherever you live, you can call them if you live in Ontario, and they can tell you all the resources related to mental health in your area. I use it all the time. It is incredibly helpful. If I'm supporting someone in Northern Ontario, I don't know the resources there. I just call Connex and I say, can you email me everything you got? And they'll send me resources. And so that's a really helpful one if you're looking for something for you or for somebody else. Then I've got the kids help phone, but it also has an adult texting option, which I didn't know about. So that was interesting. In terms of programs, the 15 years that I worked in the mental health field was for a Canadian Mental Health Association in my region. They're all over Ontario, they're all over Canada, and they offer free programs. They offer everything from just information. If you call and you say, I want to learn more about stress and burnout, or I want to learn more about bipolar disorder, they can equip you with information, or they can also provide counseling, case management. They have family support groups, lots of options depending on your region and the CMHA that's near you. You can also contact your local hospital. Most hospitals have outpatient programs, which is essentially emotional wellness, mental health wellness programs that they offer to people that are not in the hospital. So it's things they offer in the community, groups, counseling. Everything looks a little different with this pandemic environment, but a lot of them have pivoted and done a lot of online stuff. So you might find that you can access even more. If you are on Instagram, I've just put some names of some people that I trust and follow on Instagram. I like where they come from. They've got a lot of sound information. All of these ones do come from a faith-based perspective. Some of them more overt about it than others, but all of them are very solid. And again, don't write it down. You'll get it. Just don't have to be stressful about that. And then there's me. If you thought this was helpful today, I do have an online presence because I do have a mission to really equip people to be their own counselor. I think that that's the ethical thing to do, that all of us can take good care of ourselves. And so I have a website, I have an Instagram page, and I have a YouTube channel. So if it's helpful, there's some resources on there. And that is my very fast, very full presentation. I hope it was helpful. And I'd like to, I don't know, pass it back to Wayne or just invite the questions.
Yeah, thank you, Anne-Marie, for sharing. And I'm going to stop the recording, and I haven't received any questions, but you can ask questions now. I believe you can unmute yourself. Let me just stop the recording.